Hey guys, I'm Colin. I work for Bose. I'm in the research and concept development group. Basically, I work anything that's from 3 to 5 years out. My title just switched from mechanical engineer to concept engineer. This is due to the nature of the work that I do. I was hired into Bose in the rotation program, so spent 2 years jumping from company, or it's like group to group in the company. Got to decide where I landed at the end, right, which is in RCD. I've worked, actually currently, I'm working in the media lab at MIT. Bose is looking into if we can work in the active processes area. And so for the next 6 months, I'll be at MIT working in a biomechatronics lab.
Oh no, that's cool.
Yeah, Bose is a bunch of like weird stuff that most people don't know about just because we're curious. For instance, we made a car suspension because Dr. Bose for a while, his wife went into the store. He didn't want to go in, so he sat on the park bench outside and watched cars go over a speed bump. And watched it, and watched it, and watched it. Eventually said, you know what, I can solve that problem. And half an hour later, he had equations of some manifestation that could potentially solve the problem. So it took a few tens of $1 million and some years later to fix it, but that's beside the point.
Decades. And mechanical engineering interviews, how do you feel qualified, Colin?
So I haven't had one in about 5 years, but right.
Because you have a job.
But I had about 10 to get into Bose, and I've given probably between 10 and 15 myself throughout the 5 years I've been there. So I've had some experience just on both sides, and kind of I know what I'm looking for in an individual, and then hopefully these guys will be able to also key in on their experiences as well.
Great.
So should we just say our name, or should we
Sure.
give a little bit of our background as well, or what should the
Yeah, I would love to hear name, year, and why you've had some exposure, how you've had some exposure to mechanical engineering interviews. Thanks.
That's a very good point. So my name is Alex. I'm a sophomore here. Or sorry, not a sophomore. I'm a junior.
Alex, is this going to be too hard for you tonight? Okay.
Oh, no, so I'm a junior this year. I took last semester off, so I'm technically a second semester sophomore, but not really. And after first year, I had a mechanical engineering position at a small design firm in Los Angeles, and I worked on building the 10,000-year clock. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. Some people have, some people haven't. But basically, it's a fully mechanical clock in a mountain in Texas that is supposed to last for 10,000 years. So for that job, I didn't have a strictly technical interview because I was a first year, and I think that they were kind of aware of any technical limitations I might have, and so instead I had a purely informational interview, which are still, important, just like talked about my projects and the experience that I've had at Olin and on the formula team, which you should all be on. And then for the past 8 months, I worked at Apple on their Mac architecture team, so doing a lot of research and development and preliminary product design for the Mac product line and other product lines as well. We do a lot of really interesting stuff just for the heck of it too, but I can't tell you about any of it. Probably for the next 10 to 20 years.
Wow.
But yeah,
Very
there was a lot, really far out, a lot of the stuff. I mean, I'm like kind of joking, but kind of not. And for that job, I had 3 technical interviews. All of them were technical, at least partially technical, so I had like at least 1 or 2 technical questions, and some of them I had like 3 or 4. And then I interviewed with a number of other teams as well at Apple, and for all of those interviews, they were all technical too. So I'd say I interviewed with maybe 4 other teams as well, and had 1 or 2 interviews with them before I decided to go with the team that I was on for 8 months. And so yeah, it was a lot of technical questions.
And Apple is tough, so go Alex. It's awesome. They're tough.
They were rough.
They're really rough.
And I was interviewing for all the teams after, or during the summer after my freshman year. So a lot of the interviews I was like, I don't know anything. But luckily some of them I was like, obviously I got a job, so I was able to figure it out pretty well. So
Great.
I'm Luke. I am a senior this year. I'll be graduating soon. I guess I've had a few internships while I've been at Olin. My first summer I went to work at IHMC Robotics. They were competing in the DARPA Grand Challenge at the time, so I was working on humanoid robotics. And I also got to work on marine exoskeletons to make them run, jump, and sprint faster and more lethal. And then also worked on exoskeletons for paraplegic mobility, so people with lower body disabilities, helping them move their legs. Then after my sophomore year, I worked at Bose. There I did. So a lot of the interns at Bose work on tooling, so helping develop tools over the summer that the teams there can use to make their products better, to do better research, collect better data, do something like that. So what I was doing there was developing an arm with a microphone on the end of it that could take noise data in three-dimensional space, so that way they could collect really large amounts of data. I mean, like one sample set would be like 12 gigs of data that then they could use actionably in that lab to like do cool stuff that I'm still under NDA for. So there was that, and then last summer I worked at Tesla in the chassis group, so doing like basically everything that has to do with like vehicle dynamics, so brakes, suspension, subframes, a whole bunch of stuff like that. I was specifically on the brakes team, so I got to do a lot of work on pedal design, stuff for the Model 3 mules that they're making, which are basically like really expensive pre-production versions of the car to test everything out. So that's what I was doing. I've had lots of actual like technical interview experience with companies over the years that I can talk about. So that's my background.
Great, thank you. So I would love to talk about things like general interview advice, a little bit about portfolios, but because we're losing some people in a little bit, let's get right into, I have an interview coming up. I'm pretty sure it's going to be technical. How do I prepare? What should I be ready for? Anybody?
Well, I'll start.
Sure.
If you have an interview coming up, research the company, right? Know what you're getting into. Research the job you might be applying for, right? So if it's full-time or an internship, know what you're getting into, because it's going to pertain to what you're doing, right? And so if you're going in for mechanical for, I don't know, let's say like a heating system, right? I'm not going to ask you something about acoustics because that makes no sense, right? So it's going to be mainly geared toward what position you're interviewing for, and mainly look into the basics, right? I want to make sure that you know what you're doing, you know the classes you've taken, and you put something out of it. And then I want to get to know you as a person and what you've done on projects. Right? You guys were just talking about it earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely think that that's right. Like knowing what the other person does is like so important, because you know if you come to the table with a number of questions about like what will I be doing this summer, and like you know will I be able to work on this product that your company has or do this, like showing that you actually care and that you're informed about the company and like even passionate about it, I think goes a really long way. Especially in separating you from somebody else who answered the questions in the exact same way, the technical questions, that is. I think also, like, a lot of interview questions are about, like, statics and materials and, like, just knowing your stuff is important no matter what, but say, like, you're interviewing and you haven't taken, like, mech solids yet or mat sci, like, just brushing up on that stuff is, like, gonna be super important. Even if you don't like know the exact equations, like still having like at least a sense or an intuition about it will help you like go through answering the question instead of just like, I don't know. You know.
Yeah, I agree with that. You'll have interviews where you don't get asked technical challenge questions, and you have ones where you do, and it's very obvious when you're being asked like a challenge question and they're want to know whether you know the right answer. And every time I've had like an interview that involves challenge questions, it almost always involves beams and bending.
Yeah.
Like that is the number one go-to. Should I even finish this interview question? Like, do you understand beams and bending? So that's like the first thing you should just know, and you should get a good idea of like what happens.
When you say beams and bending, does that like mean finding an equation for stress in a steel beam under pressure, like that?
It's often more quantitative in terms of like analysis without actually spitting out the equations. So like the most important one would be that like the gain you get from, the question is always if you have a beam fixed to a wall and it's cantilevered out, right? How can you increase the stiffness, and what's the most efficient way to increase the stiffness? That is like one of
Everybody
the questions.
asks.
Yeah.
Along those same lines, I got a question where, let's say, you've all used remote control, right? That little door in the back that holds the batteries in, right, that slides forward, and there's a clip there that kind of deflects and then locks into place. The stress is too high on that clip. How do we reduce the stress? Right? It's not, show me the equation or give me this number. It's just, in general, how do we do this? Right? And if you can you're like, oh, okay, reduce its height because I know this equation, I know the moment of inertia of the beam is bh cubed over 12, what have you. Right? And if you throw out some equations while you're at it, great. If not, don't worry about it.
Yeah, definitely agree. You don't need the equations, you need the understanding. Because if they keep sometimes they'll keep burying you, trying to keep going. Sometimes they're asking until they can get to a point where you don't understand. That's okay. You should just keep going until you don't understand. And then when you don't understand, talk about how you would go about solving the problem even though you don't understand. So where you would go for help, how you would go about doing it. So I got asked about the natural frequency response of beam bending. And I did okay for a little bit, but then it just kept pushing until I eventually was I actually don't know anymore. But that was fine. I still moved on to the next round of interviews because I tried as hard as I could and did a decent job of answering the questions.
And will you talk a little bit about that, how they push and push and push, and there comes a point, that's the way it goes. They want to see how much you know.
It does depend on the interview and where you're interviewing too, how hard they'll push you.
Okay.
It does two things as well. One, it will, how much do you know, right? Let's dig into that. But also, how do you do under pressure, right? You're going to be nervous, right? I know that. And I'm going to dig into you until you don't know anymore. So I want to see what you do when you no longer know the answer. If you panic or try to lie to me, that's bad, right? But if you're shoot, I know where the equation is, I can't quite picture it, but here's how I go about solving it. It's okay, you're trying to work through the problem, talk out loud, right? Think out loud. That's much better than saying either I give up or trying to make something up on the spot that I might know is wrong.
Yeah, showing that you have design intuition through either experiences or classes or project teams or whatever is really much more important than knowing a equation verbatim. I think is the important factor.
For my technical interview for Tesla, I got pushed on brakes really hard because I was on the brakes team. And they pushed me to the point where it was just they were asking me to solve for the forces in a static case, and they kept pushing until I eventually got to a point where I didn't know the answer. And the answer was actually really obvious, and it was just it had to do with the fact that the case became indeterminate. So the only way you could actually solve it was to use FEA at that point. But I was so concerned about what's the equation? What is it that I need to know? But actually, it just came to a point where the only way to solve it was numerical analysis. But that was okay. It was okay that I didn't get that answer because he was you just need to think a little bit outside of the box of where you're constraining yourself, right? To do you know the equation? But actually, at some point, you have to think outside of that. And so the way I like to think about these kind of interviews is they're actually kind of fun. You shouldn't be super nervous. You should go into this I've been preparing for this. I know this stuff. I enjoy this stuff. That's why I'm a mechanical engineer. This will be fun, and if it's not fun, then maybe I don't want to work there, so it's not that big of a deal anyways. And that'll help you de-stress, I think, a little bit about it.
Yeah, being stressed out during an interview is definitely one of the worst things. Not only in the interview sense, but also from a personal health standpoint, obviously. But
so how do you not be? How do you do that?
I think it's different for everybody. Personally, I usually, for me, it depends on how much caffeine I've had in a given day, whether I'm really stressed out at 2 p.m. So, but I think that everybody has their own thing. Somebody once told me that they watched really sad movies before interviews, so they just cried, and then they got all of their emotions out. I was that seems extreme, but I think if it works for you, that's great. So I think everybody has their own way of dealing with it, and especially your first couple interviews. I remember my first super technical interview, and I was so stressed out. And I don't really get stage fright or anything like that, but I was super, super nervous. And I couldn't think straight because of it. And so I think identifying ways that you can relax yourself, deep breathing is of course really important. Don't hyperventilate. I think that people don't breathe deeply enough, and so I think in an interview it's really important to do that. But everybody has their own thing, and identifying a way to de-stress and put things in perspective. Okay, if I don't get this job, it's not the end of the world. My life isn't hanging on this. It's fine, and no matter what, I'll learn from the interview. I'll learn from the interviewer. I will do better next time. So no matter, you are in a no-lose situation. No matter what interview you have, no matter how much you want that job, even if you don't get it, life will go on. So I think that's a good, like, having perspective is really important, but it doesn't mean that you're not nervous. So figuring out a way to like de-stress and keep a level head is really important, I think.
I also, I do some like really practical, nerdy things before interviews too. Like, I get a pen and a giant stack of paper ready for technical questions, because you'll do better if you can write stuff down. Like, probably, at least I do much better. It's like, and I've actually gone into interviews without it, and they're like, oh shit, and like gone and got some paper and pencil so that way I could get it. The other thing is like I take all interviews in my room so nobody's around, and I totally do the power stance thing. That's like a real thing, you know, like if you like spread out, you actually get like more confident. It's a real thing, and you don't have to tell the whole world that I do that, but I totally do that.
Spread out like you're standing?
Yeah. So there's like real
Show us.
research.
Show us. We want to
I
know.
will not demonstrate. But there's like real research, right, that shows that like making your body larger and bigger before doing something that makes you nervous will actually help your confidence and help your performance. So like, you're in your room alone, nobody's going to judge you. Like, do stuff that is proven to work to help
Except
you.
when you're on an interview panel.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, whatever.
But yeah, he's not wrong.
Yeah,
Like Superman pose in the mirror. Go for it.
Yeah, it's not gonna negatively affect you, and it's like been shown to work. So do some stuff like that. It's fine.
Pencil and paper is such a good point.
Yeah.
Like, I
That's a good one.
didn't even think about mentioning that because it's like so like critical and important.
And if let's say you do show up and you don't have pencil and paper, if there's a whiteboard, you're fine. Right? Use the whiteboard. Get up and use it. That's why it's there. Right? I mean, for me, I had a day of 10 interviews, right? So that was kind of a long day. And the thing is, though, it turned out to be a great day and it flew by. Because they were just conversations with classmates, essentially. Because they were just asking me questions that I already knew. I just had to think about them.
And Bose is also tough, by the way. So that does not sound like an easy day, just saying.
But they're not there to make your day miserable, right? They just want to get to know you. And one of the things I try to do is make every interviewer laugh, at least a little bit, right? So throw in a joke here and there until I get them to chuckle. And if I knew if I got them to laugh, I was fine, right? Because at least they didn't hate me, even if that's
As you get like asked a question, are you allowed to just like pause and like be silent and work on it?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
You don't have to like talk through your reasoning.
I would, if it's a phone interview, I'd be like, I'm gonna write some stuff,
Yeah.
and that's like fine. If it's a phone interview though, also like you probably do need to talk just to explain what you're doing, but you don't need to explain yourself. Just be like,
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about
like,
awkward
that's fine.
pauses. Like I think that, you know, if you need to take a second, like we said, you can comment. Like I think you should always explain your reasoning. Like they want to see your thought process. I think is like what we were kind of just talking about, like seeing your intuition and like how you break something down. Like is what they want to see. They want to make sure that you, not only that you know stuff, but that you're not like an idiot. You know. So yeah, I think that's fine.
The other thing is you should think about, how do you think about people who take pauses before they speak? Like, those are composed people, right, who know what they're saying, and they take a moment to think about what they say. Like, that's something that people respect in people. So, like, you should not be nervous about pausing and thinking. Like, that is a good quality to have. Like, leverage that.
Colin, were you going to say something about sort of how to prepare or?
Just what I said.
Yeah, okay, good. More technical questions. What else do you guys have for us? Beams and bending, keep going.
I had a really fun one. I don't know if you'll ever get this anywhere, but it's an idea of why like interviewing can actually be fun. I interviewed with Levant. They make like an active hydraulic suspension for cars, and the question I got was: you have one motor, and you have a four-wheel vehicle with the motor in it, and this is like an RC car or something like that, but you have one motor. How can you design a mechanical system that allows it to go forward and backwards, but the motor is only allowed to spin in one direction?
Can we like take answers from the audience?
I don't know. Well, yeah, maybe
Sure,
we could.
someone want to give a shot? Take a shot?
Wait, do you get another actuator or no?
No, you just have a motor.
You could pulse at different. It's like a matter of conveying information. So if you have like different, you can have a motor pulsing at one frequency and then another frequency, and based off of the mechanical system that's attached to, you can differentiate between that. It just comes down to like information transfer. You have two modes and you have one input, so you have to have two different behaviors that can distinguish it. So it could be different speeds, it could be different frequencies of pulsing.
How do you make it less complicated? That'd be a real follow-up. How would you make that less
It's like, what do you
complicated?
want from me?
What's an
Leave me
easier
alone.
way?
Anybody else can answer the next question? That's good.
Maybe if it's attached like out to two gears, so one gear will spin the other one way, while the other gear will spin the other way, and there will be some way to like get the wheel to switch between the two gears. So in one way it'll be spinning forward, and the other way it'll switch back, and it'll start going with the backward spinning gear. I don't know if it can actually make that move, but
And how would you get it to switch? Sorry, I don't think I.
that's the part I'm kind of stuck on. But you would have two gears moving in different directions. Like maybe there could be a knob.
Do we have another? Good. Good. This is good. Let's keep doing this. I think
It was a good idea when I had it. Just have it like so bear with me, bear with me. You know those like springs, it's like a wrapped piece of metal. And you like wrap it around the axle so it can only drive forward a certain distance, but when you turn the motor out, it drives backwards.
I like that one. It's
Wait.
one of the mousetrap cars.
Yeah.
I got an idea. If you go at a slower speed, it will go forward, right? But then there's a device on the motor that when you accelerate really quickly, it can shift. Like, have you ever seen a servo saver on an RC plane or something?
Yeah.
So when there's an impulse on like the rudder or something, then it slips off the servo, saving it. So if you do that really quickly, it will push the gear out, and then that could be the reverse.
Yeah, that's a really good way to do it. The way I answered it was with a centrifugal clutch. So just at higher RPM, you engage a different gear that spins in the opposite direction. So,
So thoughts about the different answers? I think that was really good. I'd love to keep doing that.
So that half
I mean,
the time it's going back.
To me, it's we know we kind of throw out, like, here's my answer, here's my answer. I'd be more interested to see how you got there, right? Like, what are you relating it to? So, even though you're like, well, when I had it, it was a good idea. So, well, how'd you get there? Why'd you think it was a good idea when you got there? Right? That's what I want to know.
So really, there is something to keep talking, right?
There is, yeah. So, for instance, if you get a question, like, here's a simple question. So, a hammer and a nail together cost $1.10, right? The hammer costs $1 more than the nail. How much does the nail cost? Right, everybody got it? So it's just, but if you were to blurt out like your answer and you happen to be wrong, you're like, oh wait, and then bring it back, it's talk through it, right? Like, okay, well I know this, I know this, I know this, and then it's, here's your answer.
And also, your name is Megan, right?
Yeah.
You worked a lot on gears in like a FRC project in high school, right? Or something like that?
On a machining project.
So I would bring that in, say like, well, I answered with gearing because I know a lot about that from this project that I did, and from that I learned like X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
So like I would definitely try to like bring that in as much as you can too, like well from experience, not just like, well I pulled this answer out of the air and here it is. So. Or like I'm working on the transmission on the formula team or whatever, so that's why I thought of this.
Good.
and then my other piece of like big advice generally is like, you need to know the answer to some of these challenge questions, but then you need to find a project at Olin or a personal project that you can get engaged in and dive in on. Because people want to see that you're passionate about something and that you really care about it and you've thought about all of the little nitty-gritty details about something. Like that, like people appreciate when you know more than just like, oh yeah, you'd make it like this. They want to know like, oh yeah, I did analysis on this, I thought about 5 different ways to design it, I thought about that. Like that kind of effort in on a project shows that you have the capability to do that for that company. And that's what they want. They want somebody who is like really good at thinking about lots of different solutions and lots of ways to go about doing something and doing all the work associated with that system. So finding something to do that you're passionate about is really, really important. That is mechanical engineering.
Yeah, that will separate you from just an engineering student. They will see you as an engineer more so, I think.
They also want to see your curiosity, right? See, like when you're given a problem you don't understand, do you just accept it as that, or do you go after it, right? For instance, if they ask you a question and you have no idea how to answer it, and then at the end, they say, okay, moving on, next question. If you go back and say, wait, that question you asked me at the beginning, can we go back to that? Like, can we talk that through? Like, I'm not going to accept. That's bugging me, right? They want to see, like, no, you've piqued my interest. Okay, now I need an answer. Right? That's an engineer. If you're given a problem, you want to solve it, right? You're curious.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, love it.
So I got a lot of brain teaser questions, like not a lot I guess, but I've gotten a few brain teaser questions like in my various interviews, and one of my favorite questions of all time was, you're writing a book about 200 different ways to use a brick. Like go, like answer that. Like how do you use a brick in 200 different ways? And I was like, oh my god, I love this. So what do you guys think? Like how can you use a brick? The first thing I said, just so you know, I had gotten my first car at the time and the parking brake didn't work, and so I said, could use it as a brake. Like the first thing that came to my mind. So, a weapon? Great. Very love where your mind is. Power stance and weapon. Good combination.
Do we only have one brick? Or do we have like as many bricks as
Great question. You have as many bricks as you want.
Wait, how many bricks?
As many as you want.
So conceptually, it could be as big as the Earth.
Yeah.
So we can alter like the
This is
revolution
great
around
thinking,
the sun.
Scott.
We can
Change for a year.
Wait, I have some real advice on this problem though, and hopefully Ben Linder has done this already with you at some point. It's called problem framing, right? So in design nature, you have one of your lectures has to do with like it asks you to think of like as many birds as you can, right?
That was yesterday.
Yeah, okay. Wow. Okay. So you guys,
Okay, so very relevant, very relevant.
So like you're gonna think of all the birds you know, right? But then at some point it's gonna fail you, and you need to recontextualize the question in order to think of more things. So like first you're just gonna list all the birds you know, and then you're gonna run out, and then you need to think, all right, birds of prey. And then you're gonna think of a few more because you haven't thought of it that way. And then you need to, and that's the sort of stuff that like actually we do a good job of teaching at Olin. Like some of the harder like technical stuff, you're gonna have to teach yourself a little bit, but like stuff like that we're actually really prepared for here. So leverage that. It's like you guys know Logan in my class. He started thinking. He wrote down all of the names of all the girls sitting in the auditorium for that one. So like yeah, you can frame things like inventors too, but
Right under the bus.
So, yeah. What do you guys think about that? Do you have any more questions? Like, can you think of like 200 different ways to use brick? Do you have any more questions about that question?
Is build stuff with it? Like, does that count as one, or can you expand that into?
that's a
I can
problem
build,
framing,
like-
right?
Yeah, it's problem
and,
framing.
what kind of stuff?
Yeah. How would you use just one brick? I asked, can you like change the brick? Like, can you break it down? Can you add to it?
They're
Like,
gold bricks, right?
what?
They're gold bricks.
Yeah.
You just keep going until they hit you off.
Yeah, exactly. I just like talked for like, I think it was like, I talked for like 3 minutes, and then I was like, okay, that's enough. You're good now. So.
Alex is good.
And a question like that, what are they looking for?
I think that in my case, in that interview, they were really looking to see, because I was interviewing for a team that does like early stage, actually the team I ended up working for, like early stage product development, and so like in that setting, we want to explore every single way you can do something. And even if that way doesn't exist, it's Apple, and so they can make it exist. So I think that what they were really looking for is, can you figure out, are you creative in solving problems? Like, can you figure out, instead of just like going down one path and getting like blinders on and locked into this one way of solving a problem, can you solve it in like 200 different ways? Because that's like what was really important for them. And
So-
I think like,
yeah.
sorry to cut
No,
you off,
it's
but
good.
I think as Luke said, like Olin does a really good job of teaching you that and like encouraging that creativity instead of just saying, okay, here's a textbook, memorize these equations, this is mechanical engineering. It's a lot different. It's, well, no, there are not just these equations, but also, you know, this intuition and like this project that you can base your work on and like all of these other things. Like they give you the, 200 other ways.
So Luke, you said when we started this, you feel better when you're prepared. And before everybody came in, you guys were talking about just putting together a huge list of potential mechanical engineering questions, which would be awesome if we could do that. And we'll send it out to people. But how do you prepare? I mean, how do you say, I've got these 3 textbooks and I haven't taken these classes yet? forget all my other work for the next 2 weeks?
My actual method is like not a good method, which is that I just continue doing what I do every day, and that is how I prepare for interviews, because I do lots and lots of work on the stuff I love. That is mechanical engineering stuff all
Okay.
the time.
Okay.
So like that, but that has to do with me like only wanting to get a job in one specific field
Sure.
and knowing exactly what I want to do.
And already being involved in a club where you are deep in that space.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I know I want to do cars, and so I work on cars every single day, and that's how I prepare.
Yep. How about you, Alex? How do you?
So I agree with Luke. I honestly feel so much better in a technical interview if the night before I just like reread equations. Like even though, like just like literally like Wikipedia search like cantilevered beam equations or like beams and bending and just like look at the equations for like 5 or 10 minutes. Like I probably will not remember them verbatim, but like that's not the point. I just feel a lot better. I'm like, okay, like yeah, I remember these. Like I remember how beams work, you know? And then like the next day I have like that confidence and then like I'm not as nervous. So even though I don't remember exactly all of the little nitty-gritty ones, like I can remember general proportions and, you know, like I feel a lot better. I feel more in control. So that's how I do it. Like even, like I love Wikipedia. I think that honestly, like just like browsing Wikipedia, like, you know, beams and bending, like materials, properties, I think is really important. Like knowing a couple of key facts about like aluminum and steel and how they're different, like it's great, you know? So yeah, that's.
How about you, Colin?
Yeah, I gotta be honest, to prepare for this, I Googled technical interview questions, right? To see what, you know, either I could ask or would ask, or what you might anticipate, right? And honestly, just try that out and see what you find. If you find things like, oh, like that's new to me, like, okay, well look up, you know, look up how to do it. Because I haven't touched this, you know, the basics, like statics, kinematics, and all that in 5 years, right? If not longer. That doesn't mean I don't know well enough to get for an interview, right? And let's say if I was going to interview with, I don't know, just use Tesla, right? For instance, I look up more about automotives, right? And what, you know, maybe different stresses are, and what affects the, you know, the different like frame stiffness and so on and so forth. Just to kind of get into that subject matter, and so I'm like, okay, yeah, I know a bit about where this is going to go.
Aren't there sites? What does Apple ask in an interview? And is that a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, so careful which sites you go to. So Glassdoor is kind of weird. I looked up on Glassdoor, and one of the questions was, all right, now imagine a penguin wearing a sombrero walks through that door right now. What does he say, and why is he here? I was like, what? But I'm definitely going to use that in my next interview, because who would expect that? And it's just... and so be careful as to where you go, but I mean, there are sites, there's Engineer's Toolbox, which is great for just any information you may need.
Yeah, that's easy.
Right. I mean, there's, you know, lists of technical interview questions you may get, and so if you browse those, it should be good.
I do think there's a fundamental difference between us as mechanical engineers and what our software buddies will be doing, right? So mechanical engineers largely get hired for positions that exist and they need to fill, right? Largely has to do because the overhead costs of a mechanical engineer are higher than that of a software engineer because we spend more money than software engineers do. So like they know what they want you for when they hire you. Software will largely hire a large group of people and figure out what they're going to do with them later. And so they'll ask them a batch set of questions. They'll send out technical like questions that they have to do in an hour and send back and stuff like that. We don't get as much of that, and that's because of the nature of what we do is different than the nature of them. So like I wouldn't trust anything that says, oh, Apple will ask you this for a mechanical engineering question, because it's going to be different for us. But they will ask you about the basics, and that you can count on. So like knowing your basic classes. And the good thing about, so Olin, our classes, we take the bare minimum technical classes to be an accredited mechanical engineering school, right? So every single one of the mechanical engineering courses you have to take to graduate, those are the basics. So like thermo, transport, mech solids, dynamics, what am I missing?
Math side is really
And math side is really important. Like those 5 classes basically cover the basics.
Yeah.
And
Can you repeat this?
they're literally the making curriculum.
Yeah, you can't graduate without them.
Yeah, you can look them up. So like that, those are the questions, and there's also like some set of canonical questions for each of those classes that you can look up before you take that class that you could figure out. It's like For transport, none of you have taken that yet, I don't think. Actually, I know none of you have taken. I'm the only person at Olin who has taken transport currently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, who's not in it right now.
Excuse me.
They'll ask you like, what is the temperature gradient if you have a hot thing on this side and a cold thing on this side, and you guys haven't taken a class that actually tells you that yet, but it's super easy to look up. It's linear.
Yeah.
But like that, I've been asked that question. I got asked that question last week actually in an interview. So those are the basics that you really need to know.
I think that's such a good point. Honestly, like, I don't think I've ever looked at like what is the list of technical interview questions. I don't think it's a bad idea at all, but I haven't like done that. And I know like especially at like a company that's really large, like it definitely is team dependent. Like on the iPhone team, they'll ask you a lot of questions about like beams and bending, but also like buoyancy, for instance, because they want iPhones to be waterproof. For like a special projects team, for instance, they might ask about like suspension. I don't know why, but you know, they might. And so like depending on your team, like they will ask you different specific questions. And so be prepared for that. Be prepared to be like blindsided by a question that like you didn't expect. Like when I had my first interview ever, I was like, okay, so every single technical interview will be exactly like this, and they are not. Like there will be different questions. So just be prepared for that. Like don't expect to have all the answers. I think is important too. So like if they ask you a question that you don't know the answer to, you're not like, you're not at a loss.
So if everything you learned in your 4 years are the basics, what's a first semester freshman supposed to do?
So that's what I was saying. A lot of you could teach yourself a lot of that stuff, a lot of the like fundamentals without the hardcore parts. So like transport, the heat transfer thing is like the basic thing that you learn in transport. The hardcore stuff you learn is all the differential equations and yada yada that goes with it. But if anybody dives into that in a technical interview, if anybody dived into that on me in a technical interview, I would be like, oh my god, like that's some hard stuff. So, but most people don't do that. I've never experienced that.
So should we ask for like the syllabus of other courses and just run down the basics that they go through and then?
Yeah, that is actually like, that is probably how I would approach when we make our like thing.
Same.
Like we're gonna just pull up the syllabi and be like, oh, this is the question that would be on this chapter, this would be the question on this chapter.
And projects. Like have projects that you're passionate about, because that will set you apart from every other like first year, you know, in college. Like having a like project that you're super passionate about and that you've done a lot of work on, like that will honestly shape your engineering intuition as well. Like in some cases, way better than a class. So like that is so important, really important.
Also keep in mind, they know that you're a first year, right? So they're not gonna expect you to know what a senior knows, right? That'd just be unfair. So don't think that because you don't have the knowledge of a senior, you're not good enough, right? I know who you are coming in, I know what your experience is, I know what your which classes you've taken from your resume. So don't feel like you need to be at senior level to interview for a position, because they should know who you are.
Okay.
I mean, I've already looked at your resume, right? You made it through the first round, which is the resume check, so.
So should everyone in here have or work toward a portfolio?
I don't have a portfolio.
Okay.
But I have lots of pictures of I have pictures and I have like things I can point to, but I don't really have a portfolio, you know.
Okay.
Like, I literally pulled up Facebook, like when somebody's like, oh, show me a picture, I like pull up Facebook and go to the Revo, it used to be Revo when I would have done it, right? Go to the website and go, oh yeah, I built this. And be like, oh wow, that's super cool, tell me about it, right? So that's what I've done.
Good.
I don't think a portfolio will hurt you, but I've never needed one.
Okay.
Actually, it would certainly help you.
Sure.
It will absolutely help.
Alex,
But
do you have one?
don't
like
need it, is what
I
I
had
say.
kind of the opposite experience where like I've needed portfolios to apply to positions before. I do like product design is the field that I'm most interested in, and the jobs that I apply for are like product design. And so design is like, you need a portfolio if you're going to get a job in design, like you really do. And like I had a portfolio when I was applying for my last job, but I didn't like bring a hard copy, and the person who like interviewed me in person for the first time that I interviewed with them, that was like very confusing. You didn't need to follow that. But basically, I didn't have a hard copy, and they were like, oh, you should always have a hard copy of your portfolio, like you should always have a portfolio. And actually, they, at the end of my time at Apple, like my boss asked me for a portfolio so that they could like send it out as an example portfolio to like everybody applying, like you need to have this if you're going to apply to this job. So I think having a portfolio is super important. And also, honestly, if you have your work all in one place, it's really easy to reference, it's really easy to bring up, it's really easy for them to reference, and if you're putting that together, you can like remind yourself, oh, like this is what I actually did, this is what I actually learned. And so like that review and like that internalization is also super important. So when they like bring up your portfolio in like the PDF or like your website or whatever, I have a PDF. I don't think, like, I don't know, I'm not a website person, I guess, as much. So I send out like a PDF portfolio and they can just like pull it up and scroll through it and say, okay, tell me about your hopper, or tell me about, you know, XYZ formula, you know, or something like that. And then you will know exactly what to say.
Colin, thoughts about
All
that?
of that is really good, right? So just from listening to her, of what she just said, she plans ahead, she's ready, right? She sends it ahead of time, so, you know, in case someone wants to look at it, not during the interview, but beforehand, they have that chance, so they come in ready. And if someone sends me a portfolio, even though I didn't ask, I'm not gonna be like, well, I don't know about this, right? I'm gonna be like, oh, awesome, right? This is a great reference for me. I'm gonna read through it. So it certainly can't hurt, it can only help you. And I even think about the point of, it reminds you of what you've done, right? And so it helps you review for that interview, and that's also a great point.
It will undoubtedly make your application stronger, but you don't need it.
Right.
But I would.
So a few things about a portfolio. We will probably do at least one session this year about how to do a portfolio. I'm going to send out some follow-up information after this. These guys are going to put together some questions. I have a lot of leads for mechanical engineering interns and seniors that I'm going to send out to all of you, and I will also put in there some instructions on how to start working on a portfolio. There are in Olin Job Finder about 20 different portfolios, and I'm going to ask you to add yours, Alex. I'd love it. Just for you to look at to see what do these look like. A lot of different formats, a lot of different, you know, tools people use to put them together.
I'd also say.
But save everything you do now. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, documentation is so
I would also say don't be intimidated by an awesome portfolio. that you
Agreed.
see. Like if you see a super awesome portfolio and be like, oh, I need to make it look like that, that's so hard. Instead, just
Right.
like, it's totally acceptable to just
A
have
PowerPoint.
the title of the project and pictures of the project. Like that's all you really need, because that's all they're gonna like really look
yeah,
at
Right.
too.
they're not gonna read like big blocks of text and stuff like that. Like, I mean, I don't know that for sure, but like probably.
I mean, the thing is, if you think about it, the person interviewing you has a day job, right? Like, I've got things to do throughout the day, and if you can get me a lot of information quick, perfect, right? And so, I mean, I need some explanation, but I'm not gonna read your dissertation, right? That's just, I'm sorry, that's just too much.
Right. And the point about having hard copy with you, even if you have a beautiful online portfolio, is right on.
Several copies. Right? If
Several
you have
copies, right.
If you have several interviews that day, they may wanna keep it, right? So hand it to them, then you have more still.
Right.
Yeah, so like even at the career fair, like I printed out like a little booklet of like my portfolio and I just like gave it to companies and I was like, here you go. And they were like, oh wow. And I was like, yeah. So I keep on saying, you know, I keep on like referencing like you will stand out if you do X, Y, and Z. And that might seem like, you know, crush the competition, but that's not really what I mean. I mean, there are so many people that look just like you on paper, you know, and they may not be as qualified for the position, they may be more qualified, but there are definitely ways to stand out from the sea of mechanical engineers applying for whatever position you're also applying for. And I honestly think a portfolio is one super solid way to do it. Like you mentioned earlier, like making people laugh. Having a personality is another super good way to stand out. Like really important, because people, you know, I like read a quote once that isn't entirely true, but I kind of like it. It's like people who like know equations are, you can like teach those hard skills, but you can't teach someone to be a good person, you know, or like, I'm paraphrasing, but like to be fun to work with and like good to work with and like work well on a team. So like leveraging that to like really stand out, I think is important.
So that comes back to being nervous or feeling comfortable, right? Like, are you nervous right now? Right. I mean, when you're answering the question, he is, but everybody else is. Right, but it's like, think of this scenario, right? Think of this environment. You're with a bunch of friends, right? You all know this information, and we're asking you these random questions, and you're just like, oh, like, I think I can get that, right? And you're just rattling off ideas. And if you were, think if you're talking to a friend and you're just talking through a problem, that's all it is. Right?
Yeah.
If you, like, again, if you don't know it, it's not the end of the world, right? I want to see how you think through it. So don't think you failed the quiz if you didn't get the question right. It's okay.
Awesome. Who else has questions? Go ahead.
I was just saying, there's a good chance that if you like get hired at the place, the person who interviewed you might actually be your colleague, not your boss. Like that will happen, and so like it's a good chance for you to figure out whether you like that person too, and whether you like that fit. Like how the person interviews you, not just like the questions you're gonna ask at the end about the work culture and yada yada, but actually how that person interviews you is telling of the culture of the place that you want to work. Like I could tell after my Tesla interview that I was going to enjoy working with the person who did the interview with me, because like when I got lost and when I got stuck, when he actually got all the way to the end, instead of just like, all right, moving on, he's like, all right, I'm gonna explain it to you, and I want you to explain it back to me. I was like, that's so awesome. Like he wants to develop my skills. That's the kind of environment I want to be in. So.
Yeah, another less technical but semi common interview question is, teach me something. Right? Pick a topic, I don't care what it is, teach me. Right? And then I want to see how you bring someone through that process. That says a lot about the person.
That's cool.
Does it have to be engineering related?
Unless I tell you to. If I say, tell me something engineering, teach me something engineering, then yes. But if I'm like, teach me something, if you're like, all right, ballroom dancing, here we go, right?
Yeah.
You may catch me off guard, you're like, whoa, hold on, right? And which would make you laugh, that's okay, right? Or they may be really uncomfortable with it, so careful with that. But that's the thing, it doesn't have to be engineering. You can be out of the box. Because like she said, make yourself stand out of it, right? Don't be, don't get to confine yourself to a mold, right? That's okay.
And that's back to the problem framing. Ask that question. Always clarify. You can always clarify if someone's asking you something in an interview and you're not sure what they mean.
If you're interested in doing mechanical design as a field, I highly recommend going to the library and getting textbooks and reading books about mechanical design. Olin does a real bad job of teaching canonical mechanical design, but we have a wealth of textbooks that go over it, and there's something to be said for that, right? Like mechanical design is something that you don't really need a professor to teach that to you. You can get it in a textbook. So go to the library and check some out and start learning stuff and experience, like seeing how things are made, because you can find that information. You can teach yourself, and that's like a good quality to have as a person too, as a new hire. Like they want to see people who can teach themselves stuff. So
Yeah, that's super important.
I can recommend some textbooks.
Other questions?
I had a question about the portfolio. So, if you have a portfolio, do you have to include like a finished final product, or can you also include like a janky prototype that you learned a lot from?
Totally, a jank prototype is awesome. That's super stellar. I mean, like, yeah, no, I think that's great. Yeah, no, it's awesome. Like, I in my portfolio after freshman year, I had my hopper was like part of it, and if that's not a jank prototype, I don't really know what is. And so I like had the different phases, like sketch modeling and that project, I got asked so many questions on, like how would you test this to make sure that it sustained like 100, or how would you make sure that this sustained like 100 cycles, of like use by a child, and like how would you make sure that it survived an impact test on the ground, and like all these different things. And so I think what a portfolio to me means showing passions, showing competence, showing what you're interested in, but also a touchstone for interviews, a talking point. Like you said, you're not gonna read the dissertation, but you're gonna look at the photos and say, oh, cool, all right, great, like let's talk about this, like let's dig into this a little bit more. So I think that's what a portfolio means.
Yeah. I know this is about technical interviews, but to me, projects are more important, right? Because those are, like you said, talking points that I can kind of dig into. And by digging into your projects, I'm going to know if you know what you're doing, right? And if I'm going to keep pushing until I know exactly what you did throughout that project, and if you actually understood what you did, right? I saw someone do a presentation where they said that their project was, in a dumbed-down version, they put the code through the compiler and then loaded it onto the robot, right? And it's like, okay, let me dig into that a bit, and as soon as you start digging into it, it crumbled. It's like, okay, you didn't really do anything, did you? Right? And that's obviously bad, but if you did the project, right, and if you're passionate about it, that'll come out in the discussion, right? If I just stop you from talking, that's awesome, right? Because it's like, I know you're passionate about it, you love it, that's your thing, and that's what I want to know.
About like doing a project that you're passionate about so you can talk about it, Every single place that I've interned, the person interviewing me has been a car person, even though I haven't been interviewing for car jobs. So at Bose, even though the suspension project was dead, I worked with that team. And so we talked about that in the interview, not about the project I was going to work on. And they were just evaluating my technical competency and whether I was like into cars, because then that meant I would be a good fit for the project. Because especially since like it's possible to be working on a project that they're not allowed to tell you about the project until they hire you. But if I was working with a group that was working on cars, right, then they can tell me about stuff that's old news and we can talk about that. And so that's exactly what we did. So it's, and like same thing when I was working on the exoskeletons, like the guy I interviewed with, like was super into cars, and he actually said like the best way to evaluate someone's mechanical competency is if they know anything about the car they drive. And I was like, okay, cool, like this is gonna be easy, because like so, and that can go. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say from this is like there's jobs with people who are working on the stuff you are interested in, and you can find those people and you can talk about the things you're interested in. Like if you're applying for jobs at places that are doing stuff you're not super interested in, I mean, like why? Why are you doing that? You can find a job that has to do with what you want to do, and then actually get the opportunity to talk about the stuff you love. So like it's easy.
I don't know if it's easy, but I think that Luke is right.
The other thing, this is just completely off topic, but you guys know a programming language. You know MATLAB.
Yeah.
And as mechies, you'll become really good at MATLAB, so make sure that's on your resume. At Bose, they use MATLAB like crazy. If you want to work at Bose, hype up your MATLAB skills. Yeah, like they.
Not wrong.
Yeah, they did all of their signal processing in MATLAB when I was there, and so I built my entire robotic arm thing in MATLAB with like a GUI and everything. So.
Any parting words, general interview advice? This has been great. Colin, you can go first.
Relax.
Yeah.
Right. You guys are from Olin. This is not a name to laugh at, right? This is Olin's a big deal. So you have the knowledge, you know the information, you can solve the problem, just work your way through it. It's gonna be fun, right? Be yourselves. And if for some reason you feel like you didn't fit with that company, like she said, move on, not the end of the world. Right, again, you're from Olin, there'll be other opportunities, it'll be fine.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think you summed it up really well. I think just expanding on that a little bit, keeping everything in perspective is such a good way to reduce anxiety. Like, this might sound like a little hippy-dippy, but like taking deep breaths is really important, and remembering like, you know, I have like 80 or like whatever years left in my life. Like if I don't get this one job for this one summer, like that's gonna be okay, and I'm gonna survive, and like my life will still be great, and I'm not gonna, you know, die from this.
You're gonna be 99, Alex. I'm
On the
impressed
nose.
by you. Love it.
Minimum. So just like
And
keeping
then
that in
some.
perspective, I think is like, I think that's what really helps me. So it might be different for you guys, but that's what really helps me.
Yeah, similar, the way I think about technical challenge questions and like that, because that's the intimidating part, right, is that you became a mechanical engineer because you were interested in solving those problems. Don't think of it as like, oh my god, they're testing whether I know something. Think of it as they're testing whether I could like be a mechanical engineer, like if I can solve this problem. And if you don't know the answer, they're testing, well, you don't know the answer, but how would you go about solving it? How would you be an engineer? That's what they're testing, and that's why you became an engineer. So like enjoy and have fun with your technical questions.
Yeah, we don't expect you to memorize 4 years of equations. Holy
Yeah.
hell. No way, right? So what does school taught you to do? How to learn, how to solve problems.
That's what all of it especially I think really does. So.
So a few other, go ahead, Luke.
The last, especially on the note about, you know, I don't expect you to know 4 years of equations, but a good engineer would be able to think about what are the variables that matter. And that's like the jumping off point. Start there, and then go. You can figure it out.
Great. So a few other just general things, as they said, learn about the company, learn about the people that you're going to be talking to, see what you can find out about them. If you throw something in like, oh, Colin, I realize, you know, you worked here before you were at Bose, like they're going to sort of look at you. That's another one, like Alex said. And they're not going to think you're creeping on them. They're just going to think that you are prepared. And that's a way to set yourself apart. Always have questions for the end of the interview, okay? And they're not like, well, what if I want to leave at 4 some days? No. You want to make them about the company, the products, the technology. Show them that you have done your homework and learned about the company, okay? Think about your projects before you go into the interview. If it's something you did 4 or 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, and you say in the interview, I really don't remember, it was a long time ago. Not good, you know?
It's on your resume.
If it's on your resume, if it's in your portfolio, it is fair game to talk about it and refresh yourself. What did I do? What were my challenges? Okay? Give context to every answer, to every project. What did I learn? Okay, what was the result? And as they said, I think the technique that these guys talked about, which is awesome, is pausing after someone asks a question. And if I've ever done a practice interview with any of you, this is what I tell you. You just say, wow, great question. Can I think about that for a minute? And take your time, because the interviewer would much rather you took 30 seconds, literally, and that's going to feel like an eternity. But they would rather you did that than you launch into a story and then you go, oh, this is really a bad one, but now I'm down the road and I better finish it. Okay? So, wow, great question. Can I think about that for a minute? It's a very composed, mature response. And as I said too, you're going to get better with each one of these that you do. So, do one with me before you do any.
Yeah, part of the thing I was saying is what Sally was saying is like you should do an interview with Sally. I've done it before and it's super helpful. And also I like bounced my resume off of Sally so much.
And obviously I cannot help you with this technical part, which is why this was so good, but I can just help you feel better about presenting yourself and telling your stories.
Yeah, actually, for real, if she's offering to help you with your resume, that's key. Because there's a big difference. Like my younger cousin sent me his resume. I looked at it, I was like, God, this is awful. Right? And I was like, let me help you with this, right? And honestly, it took me 2 hours to really get it down, something that was, a little more manageable, right? And this isn't my resume, but I spent 2 hours with it. If it's yours, you should be spending some time with it, right? So if you give me kind of like a half-assed piece of paper that shows me what you did, it's like, okay, you don't really care, do you?
Right.
So the more effort you put into what you give me, like for instance, when like her portfolio, it's like, wow, she cares. Like this is her thing. She's into it. Like she wants this.
Yeah, I think even though I don't have a portfolio, I definitely make up for it with like a very well thought out resume that I've thought about a lot. So.
You're slacker, Luke.
Yeah, so you mentioned that when you're talking through your thought process, go to where you know and what you're doing each step. If you hit a point and it's like the next step would be to look this up, like I would Google it. Is that like can you be like get to a point in a problem where and you have to relate to this and I know there's an equation for it and it's common and I don't know it off the top of my head, so I'd go look that up?
Totally fine. There were several interviews where I was like, oh, that equation. I know the variables, like you were saying, but I can't remember how it goes. I know it's in the front cover of my textbook. I know exactly where it is, but I can't think of it. Fine.
Yeah, the follow-up, if you answered like that, would be, well, what matters? And that's what, they don't care if you know the equation. Somebody else found that out 200 years ago because we're mechanical engineers. So, that's not the important thing.
Do you have any tips for making your resume stand out? That's one of the first steps.
Talk to Sally.
Yeah, talk to Sally. Yeah, talk to Sally. So for my resume, my last resume was very non-conventional, I would say, and my current one is like a little bit more conventional, but like I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing this, but like I would definitely recommend like being kind of creative with your resume if
There's
you want
so
to.
many templates.
Yeah, there are also templates.
Tons.
But if you want to do your own thing, like my resume
Sure.
was like literally an icon of my face, because I really love making icons. Like that's like what I do in my spare time, which sounds awful when I say it like that, but it's really fun, trust me. So my old resume was like an icon of my face, and then for each of like the subcategories, like education, volunteering, like other experience, skills, whatever, I had like different little icons. I had like a little camera, a little like coffee cup, and like the people who ended up hiring me at Apple like saw my resume and like a sea of like 2,000, 3,000 resumes or whatever, or like more. I don't know how many they got. And they were like, this is cool.
different.
And
It's
so
just
they
different.
called me. Yeah, it was different.
Good.
Yeah, it was different.
Good.
So like I personally would also advise not using a template. If you feel comfortable in that space, like and if you want to push that space and like explore it, you know, that can be really fun and like really creative and also help you stand out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the wording is important too, because not only do you, if you look at the resume, you want to stand out, but also if Apple does get 2,000 resumes for a single position, they're going to use a word search to find the right words, right, for that position that they need. So make sure that it's articulated well, right, so it explains exactly what you've done very concisely.
That's a super good point.
One, last year, I told Sally that I absolutely wanted to work at a car company this summer, and she advised for me to put formula as the first thing on my resume, and I did it, and it worked. So I advise you to put the things that you're most passionate about highest on your resume.
Right, and relevant. I mean, we
Yeah.
all think we should do them chronologically, and that's one way of doing it, but
not the
what
best
do you
way.
want to do? Pick that one and put it up top. That's what is going to speak to the people that are hiring the people that do that.
My resume is far from chronological. It's like purely in order of things I find interesting, top to bottom. So.
And that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, it's really clever. I hadn't thought about that.
Thanks for coming, everybody. This was great. Thanks again, you guys.
If you guys
Awesome.
have any questions, feel free to reach out to me and Luke too. Like I'm sure that he's happy to talk to you too, like one-on-one.